Hi everyone, today we're going to start 2.7, which is prove angle pair relationships. Right angle congruence theorem. All right angles are congruent. That seems pretty silly to say, but we're going to prove why all right angles are congruent in the next slide. All right, so let's prove the right angles congruence theorem. Angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. We want to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. With our proof, what's the first thing we're going to write? We're going to write what is given. And what is given is that angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. And the reason that was given. Okay, so now that we know that they are right angles, what does it mean to be a right angle? It means that the angle is equal to 90 degrees. So the measure of angle 1 is equal to 90, and the measure of angle 2 is equal to 90. And the reason? Well, that's just the definition of a right angle. All right. So since both of those angles are equal to 90 degrees, that then means that the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 2, and that's the substitution property. So I'm going to just put substitution. If we know that the measures are the same, that means that those angles are then congruent. So angle 1 is then congruent to angle 2, and that's just the definition of congruent angles. This little sign there means congruent. And I'm done. So now that we proved this theorem, you can use this in any proof. All right, let's write a proof. We are given that segment AB is perpendicular to segment BC. We are also given that DC is perpendicular to segment BC. We want to prove that angle B is congruent to angle C. All right, so the first thing we want to write here is the given. So segment AB is perpendicular to BC. And we know that DC is perpendicular to BC. All right, and that reason it was given. First statement in our proof right here. All right, so next, scroll down. What does it mean to be perpendicular? It means that those segments create a 90-degree angle or a right angle. So then I can say, well, that means that angle B and angle C are right angles. And the reason, well, that's just the definition of perpendicular lines. And so finally, since we know that those are since we know angle B and angle C are right angles, we can use our right angle congruence theorem that if we have right angles, that means that those angles are congruent. So angle B is congruent to angle C, and the reason, that's the right angle congruence theorem. And I'm just going to put the congruent symbol, theorem. And I am done. Congruent supplement theorem. If two angles are supplementary to the same angle or two congruent angles, they are congruent. So what that is just saying is that if angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, meaning they add up to 180. And angles 2 and 3 are also supplementary, which means they add up to 180. It then means that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. Congruent complement theory is the same thing, but now using complementary angles. So if two angles are complementary to the same angle or to congruent angles, they are then congruent. So what that's saying here is that if angle 4 and 5 are complementary, which means add up to 90 degrees, and we know angle 6 and angle 5 are also complementary angles, we then know that angle 4 and 6 have to be the same measure. They are congruent. All right, so let's prove that two angles supplementary to the same angle are congruent. We are going to prove that theorem. All right, so what's given is that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary, and angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary. So we want to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So as always, the first thing we want to write is what is given. So we know that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. So I'm just going to put sup. And we know that angle 3 and angle 2 are supplementary, but once again, I'm just going to put sup. All right, and the reason that was given. All right, so knowing that those angles are supplementary, what does that mean? Well, supplementary means that those angles add up to 180 degrees. So I want to write that out. So the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to 180 degrees. And I can say the same thing for my second statement, that the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to 180 degrees. And the reason for that, that's just the definition of supplementary angles. So def of sup angles. So now, since I wrote two equations, they're both equal to 180, that means that those two equations are equal to each other. So I'm going to rewrite this as the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 2. And the definition there is just substitution, or technically the transitive property. But I'm just going to put substitution. All right, now looking at our equation, what do you notice is on both sides of the equal sign? Well, we have the measure of angle 2. Oh no. Sorry, so we have the measure of angle 2 and the measure of angle 2. So if you have something on both sides of the equal sign, they cancel out. So I can actually get rid of the measure of angle 2 on both sides. And when I do so, I'm left with the measure of angle 1 is equal to the measure of angle 3. And the reason for that is subtraction. The subtraction property. Remember, you can take things away. All right, so now that I have that those measures are equal to each other, I then can say that the angles are congruent. And the reason, that's the definition of congruent angles. And I proved what I needed to, so now I'm done. Linear pair postulate. If two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. Vertical angles congruence theorem. Vertical angles are congruent. So these are two other postulates and theorems that you should write down in your notes, and you can now use them for your proofs. All right, so if angle 1 is equal to 75 degrees, find angle 2 angle 3, and angle 4. This isn't a proof here. Now we just have a problem. We're going to kind of work with vertical angles. All right, so it tells me angle 1 is equal to 75 degrees. I need to find the measure of everything else. All right, so if angle 1 is 75 degrees, what does that mean angle 3 is equal to? Well, it's also going to be 75 degrees because they are vertical angles. All right, so now let's move to angle 2. Well, what type of angles is angle 1 and angle 2? They're supplementary angles. They add up to 180. So if I know that angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to 180, and angle 1 is equal to 75 is equal to 180. So 75 plus angle 2 is equal to 180. To find angle 2, I'm just going to subtract 75 from each side, and I end up getting 105. So angle 2 is equal to 105. Well, if angle 2 is equal to 105, what does angle 4 equal? It's also going to equal 105 because they are vertical angles. All right, let's try this again now with problems that are a little bit tougher. So if angle 1 is equal to 3x, I'm going to write that down, and angle 3 is equal to 2x plus 50, and I want to find all the angles, how am I going to do that? Well, just like the last problem, I know angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles, which means they are congruent. All right, so I'm going to set those two equations equal to each other. So I have 3x is equal to 2x plus 50. If I subtract 2x on each side, that cancels, and I'm left, oh, that should be a 50, sorry. And I'm left with x is equal to 50. All right, so I erased my equation in my diagram, and now I'm going to write that angle 1 is equal to 50, and 3 is equal to 50. Now I need to figure out what the measure of angle 2 and 4 is. All right, well, once again, angles 1 and 2 are what type of angles? Supplementary angles, which means they add up to 180. So if I have angle 1 plus angle 2, that's equal to 180. Well, angle 1 we know is 50 plus angle 2 is equal to 180. That then means that angle 2 can only equal 130. So if angle 2 is equal to 130, which other angle equals 130? Angle 4, because they are vertical angles. All right, here's our last question. This is an AIR style or ACT style question. Which equation can be used to find x? So if I look here, I have these two angles. What's important here is you have to figure out what type of angles are they? Are they vertical or are they a linear pair, supplementary angles? So now thinking about the question I just asked you and looking at your answer choices, which one is going to be used to find x? A, B, C, or D? Well, the answer here is B. These are supplementary angles, a linear pair, so they add up to 180, so I have to add the two equations together. So now let's take this a step further and let's actually solve for x. So if I have 32 plus 3x plus 1 is equal to 180. All right, combine your like terms. 3x plus 33 is equal to 180. So if I do some math here, x is equal to 49. All right, now what is the measure of TPS? Well, TPS is this angle right here. So I don't really know much about this angle, and I'll use 3 tick marks here. except for RPS, this angle right here, has to be 32. Why? They're vertical angles. So now I'm going to add my 49 to this equation right here, the 3x plus 1. So when I plug that in, 3 times 49 plus 1, I end up getting 148. So if this angle here is equal to 148, I also know that TPS is equal to 148 because they are supplementary. They are the same. So now I can do another tick mark because I know that they are vertical angles. They're the same measure. So 148 is our answer.